Hi, I'm Evaleen from Awesome Training and Confident Kids. I hope everyone's having a great Neuro Pride week. I'm delighted to make this video as part of the celebrations, and I'm going to talk about 5 myths around autistic people and our social skills. So you may have heard that autistic people are supposed to lack social skills. It's actually part of how we are identified or diagnosed. It's part of the diagnostic criteria that autistic people have difficulties interacting with other people or understanding other people or reading other people and social cues. But that, of course, is a myth. And it's a bit bothering, I suppose, that or bothersome that, a myth is actually part of the diagnostic criteria for autism, for autistic people. But we won't spend too long on that this evening. What I'm going to talk about is the myths, around social skills and what we need to actually understand about autistic communication. So when we talk about social skills, I suppose, what does social skills even mean? People talk about it, kind of greeting people, interacting with others, making friends, maintaining relationships, being good at advocating for yourself and your needs, dealing with conflict, basically all those skills that we need to coexist, to live with one another, and I suppose live a life where we have good boundaries ourselves as well and are respectful of other people's boundaries. All of those things kind of fit into social skills, in a very general way. But when, these myths around autistic social skills, I suppose what that social skills means is that autistic people lack the ability to say things that we don't mean and partake in a social game of charades where some people think there is a winner, although really there is no winner unless, of course, you think that social ranking is important. So do autistic people lack the ability to lie for kind of no good reason? Maybe we do. Do we lack the ability to judge each other and see who's more important than the other in this kind of social ranking game that a lot of people in our society play? And the answer to that is, well, yes, but it's not that we lack social skills. We're just not conforming to the ways people have been socialized to interact with each other, to meet each other with judgment rather than with understanding and compassion. Because when you operate within a social hierarchy, you're going to be constantly insecure about your own ranking and kind of judging where other people are in relation to you. And a lot of social interaction is based on that. Whereas autistic people actually navigate the world in a much more egalitarian way. So we would see everybody as equal. So we're not engaged in those social games that people are playing. And when you're not engaged in those games, then obviously they're going to make no sense to you. They're just going to be meaningless. And just to give an example, like an autistic person might take advice from somebody or, believe maybe what someone is saying if they can back it up with hard facts, with evidence. But in a social hierarchy, those who are neuroconforming are might believe what someone else tells them just because they've got a higher social ranking or a position of power. So autistic people would maybe question that person in power, wouldn't just take it as truth because someone in a higher ranking said it, because we wouldn't see them as a higher ranking, whereas other people might just take it because they think that person is more important, basically, in a very simplistic way to explain it. So, autistic people, it's not that we lack social skills, we just interact with people from a very different place. We meet people, I suppose, as equals. rather than trying to figure out who's more important than the other in social ranking games. So, and that's our first myth, I suppose, that we lack social skills at all. You know, we don't. What we're doing is we are communicating and meeting and interacting with other people in our way, which is, again, as I said, a kind of egalitarian way of interacting with people, seeing everyone else as the same as ourselves. So our second myth would be, you know, that we have general faulty social skills, and this idea that we can't understand other people. So that was a theory put out there in the 90s by Baron Cohen, saying that we lacked theory of mind, that autistic people can't really understand other people's perspectives. Thankfully, Damon Milton, an autistic psychologist, put forward his theory in 2012, I think, which is gaining much more traction now recently, which is brilliant, saying, well, actually, maybe autistic people do have difficulty understanding other people's perspectives or these social games that they're playing and why. But other people who are not autistic have the same kind of difficulty reading us. And yeah, when you look at the utter tosh, nonsense and myths that have been written about autistic people, yes, that kind of confirms that other people who are not autistic or don't know they're autistic maybe have grave difficulty in understanding us, reading us, understanding our perspective and the way we communicate. And basically, the double empathy theory was proven, I suppose, in 2019 in Edinburgh University, where two researchers, looked at the way autistic people communicate with each other and found that actually autistic people are really highly effective communicators when we're communicating within our own community, just like non-autistic people are. So non-autistic people are good at communicating within their own community. When we communicate with people outside of our communities or outside of our neurotypes or outside of our cultures, there's miscommunication. That's where our communication breaks down. And yeah, that happens. Well, of course, it's going to happen between autistic culture and non-autistic culture. It happens across lots of cultures. Then we make, I suppose, more of an effort to understand people. So it's not that we've got faulty skills, that we can't understand other people's perspectives or anything like that. It's actually that this is quite a normal thing for human beings, for us to have some difficulty maybe understanding someone from a different culture, understanding their beliefs, understanding their perspectives. And it just, shows that this happens between autistic and non-autistic people. The third myth is that autistic people are to blame for every miscommunication between us and non-autistic people. Unfortunately, that is the way autism is defined, that we're the ones who've got difficulty interacting with people. We're the ones who've got difficulty establishing and maintaining relationships. But sure, communication, making friends, building relationships are all two-way things. So obviously it couldn't be all of our fault. And why are we trying to, put blame on a group of people? Why don't we look at the situation and see what's happening and maybe see how we can fix that? Because we don't need to be blaming each other. Blaming each other for miscommunication isn't helpful. It's just adding to the divide, isn't it? Whereas we look at, oh, look, these are two different cultures, two different ways of communicating. Miscommunication is happening here in the space between us. And how do we fix that? Kind of apportioning blame is a waste of time, really, isn't it? It is interesting to note, though, that, there is some research to show that non-autistic people maybe don't react very welcoming in a very kind or welcoming way to their autistic peers. That was research that was done in 2017 that showed that within a milliseconds of meeting us, non-autistic people often other us or decide they don't really want to get to know us. So, do my social skills matter if within milliseconds someone is going to make that snap decision that they don't want to get to know me? I could have the best social skills in the world. I could be the best friend. I could be the most supportive person ever. But if someone doesn't want to give me a chance, I can't be responsible for that. So, we again have to look at how other people are responding to autistic people, and how that's adding to this miscommunication and adding to the problems that we have. Our fourth myth is that we need to be taught how to interact with our peers. Now, this is a really common story, particularly in schools or with children, that autistic kids need to be taught how to interact with their peers. Now, how good are our peers at interacting with autistic kids? You know, and why is nobody looking at that? Because if you ask autistic people who once were children, what was your childhood like? The stories are quite sad. Talking about being excluded, not being asked to events or birthday parties, being bullied, you know, having no friends in school, being laughed at, being mocked, people reacting strangely when you talked about things that you love, bring you joy, your interests. So maybe we should be teaching each other to do a bit better and meet each other with kindness and compassion rather than judgment and trying to fit into a gang and keep everybody else out. You know, there's a lot of work to be done around that. So maybe it's not autistic people who need to be taught how to interact with our peers. Maybe it's non-autistic people or neuroconformative people who are, you know, communicating and interacting with others in a way that, you know, basically they've been socialized to compete with other people, to, you know, see if they're part of the gang or whatever, instead of actually just accepting people who are in front of us. So I know when I read the research in 2017, I was quite angry, I'll be honest. You know, that this is how autistic people are treated. I was like, well, we don't even have control over this. We can't do anything if someone's prejudiced against me. And it, you know, took me a bit of time, and I, you know, had to think about it, and I suppose afford then non-autistic people the same understanding that I give to my own community, to the autistic community. You know, we are products of our environment. We respond to the way other people treat us. So therefore, non-autistic people, are people who are neuroconformative, are also going to be products of their environment. And like when you look at the environment, where are the autistic people? You know, where's our representation in media, in film, in the newspapers, you know, in books about ourselves? Obviously, there's more and more, and it's growing and growing, which is amazing. But let's say traditionally, up until this decade, autistic people were excluded from everything. So, you know, and a lot of us hide our stims and maybe the way we communicate, we mask all of that, you know, we keep it all inside. So people don't have an experience of what it is to, you know, be authentically autistic, what that is, and don't have an understanding of that. So if you don't have that understanding, and that group of people have been othered and excluded, you know, well, then that's how prejudice, I suppose, is created, isn't it? And that's how people might meet us in that way rather than in an accepting way. So my last myth is that we need to be taught how to behave. Now, that's where things get mixed up big time, because this idea that we lack social skills gets mixed up sometimes with behavior. And if a child or an adult is experiencing PTSD and having trauma responses, or has high anxiety and is maybe running away or lashing out, or you know, isolating themselves, or class clowning, or any of the, you know, 100 of different ways you can respond to anxiety and trauma. If we're doing those things, people think, oh look, they don't know how to behave because they were told they don't like, I know they don't have social skills, so I must teach them how to behave. So then this is where like modeling behavior and all this nonsense comes in then, because they think the child just doesn't know how to behave. You know, they need to be taught to do this, and it's like, well, that's ignoring somebody's anxiety and somebody's trauma. And that's, you know, really not seeing someone's perspective and not understanding someone's communication, and just making an assumption that that person needs to be taught how to behave. So it's really important that we know autistic people know how to behave. Absolutely know how to behave. But what happens sometimes is people don't understand when we're communicating a response, I suppose, to how poorly we are treated in society. The other thing I would say about us being taught to behave is we don't conform a lot of the time. So we are here sometimes questioning the status quo. We are trying to make people think, I mean, not on purpose, it's just literally how we are. We think a lot, we think about things, we're really logical. So, you know, I suppose if something doesn't make sense to us, we will question that. And then that can challenge other people and it can challenge their worldviews. And sometimes people don't like that. And they think we're rude and we need to be taught how to behave. Behave as what? What are we doing when we're teaching people to conform? You know, and that is a discussion for another time. So thank you so much for listening to me and enjoy the rest of Neuro Pride.